Bam! MC is in the house. What's going on, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I am here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, and usually taking a topic, deep diving somewhat, having a good time while doing it. Appreciate you guys joining me every week. As usual, we are streaming on YouTube, a couple of Facebook channels, X, and I don't know if we're on Instagram this week. As I'm looking at it, it looks like I forgot to check that box on the software this morning. So, you know what? Sometimes it'd be like that. So, who do we got here? If you are watching right now, there's a bunch of you guys watching it. Do me a favor, just comment, say what's up. Let me see where you're at. Check in. I always like to see who's hanging out with me. First couple of minutes, people are usually jumping on. Who do we got here? Judge Cohen, what's going on, brother, man? Good to see you, as usual. So, for those of you that do not have a regular relationship with my content, what I talk about are topics relevant to men looking to gain control of their lives, start businesses, become entrepreneurial, become a little bit more productive. Even if you don't have a business, it's a thing to have a mindset of somebody who is looking to create value for himself, even if for the moment restricted to the confines of the structure of your employ. So I will say that there's something to be learned from creating systems and structures of pressure in our life and the movement that winds up coming from those structures. Aaron, what's going on? Good to see you. Corey, what's up, brother? Johnny Groove, what's up, brother, man? Jamie, good to see you, my friend. All right. So today's topic is why your allies suck. And if they do suck, there's a reason. And the reason could be a whole assortment of things. And we're going to sort of break down what the collection of those things are and what they mean to you and what control you have over those things in the future, over those dynamics of the future. Now, what I will say is from the beginning, an alliance, what is the value of an alliance? It's two people coming together to create something that they themselves could not create. When both parties are able to do that via this connection, we call that extra stuff synergy, right? And that's the surplus output that results from the alliance of the two parties. 1 + 1 = more than 2 in that instance. So if we're willing to operate under that premise that is what an alliance is supposed to be, today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about those situations where that is not the case. When we wind up getting, Caceres, good to see you, brother, man. When we wind up in situations where we are frustrated with the alliances that we are in, chances are there's something that went wrong along the way. There's a good chance that you started off on the wrong foot. You started off with the wrong design or the wrong structure of the alliance. And what you're experiencing is just that sort of slow realization that this alliance that you created with so much enthusiasm at some point is starting to appear unsustainable. You're starting to realize, yeah, this isn't going to last. And then if done improperly to an even higher degree, there's no good way out, it seems. It's like, yeah, me and this guy are cool, but I can't continue this. And when it ends, we're not going to be friends anymore. You know, he's going to blame me for a bunch of stuff. I'm going to blame him, whatever the case is. A lot of times it comes down to a poor structure in the beginning. Now, most people, and in my experience, I'm saying most for a reason, most people are conflict averse. And they're not looking to create any sort of conflict with the people they come into contact with. But the problem arises when the vulnerability of the people that they're usually dealing with increases. The people become more fragile because that point where friction becomes conflict winds up being a lower and lower barrier of entry. Which means like I could talk to my good friends very bluntly, very directly. And I do not have to sort of paint it, or butter it up to make it more palatable, to let them understand that the way that I'm saying this is not looking to infringe any way on who you are as an individual. And I respect your autonomy and identity. Well, the problem with vulnerable people is any degree of friction past a certain amount, and it immediately gets interpreted as an existential threat. Instead of dealing with what they were told, the information that they were given, they're instead dealing with the delivery system of that message. And they're making sure that there is not an issue that threatens their very existence, right? So, how does that sort of play itself out in the real world? Well, if you are used to dealing with fragile people, and in the beginning, sometimes what will happen is people will accommodate these people. Individuals will accommodate the people they're trying to connect with who are fragile by allowing them to sort of get away with a higher level of care. In other words, I will butter everything up and pussyfoot around and sort of hold your hand because I understand you're so fragile. And then what winds up happening as we continue down this alliance, I realize at some point that all this extra care that I'm giving them is now making the alliance unsustainable. I can't continue to do this for you. And what winds up happening is then I would resent the individual for not carrying their own weight. It's like, okay, I still have to hold your hand. Like, when are you going to start doing these things on your own? Speaking generally as I am. And what winds up happening is in that situation, I would be the one at fault because I'm the one that agreed to hold their hand from the beginning. And there was no sort of codified or at least mentioned expectation that at some point they were going to be able to do this for themselves. So a lot of times we wind up in alliances that suck because the expectations that we set from the beginning was not accurate in terms of the expectations we actually had. I say this often, but I actually joked about it this morning. But I was talking to my mastermind group this morning, and one of the guys, shout out to my man Oscar, who's in the group, he was talking about, a client, well, not even a client, but really an ally, an associate that had reached out for a little bit of insight. And he provided that insight and willingly provided that insight. But there was a certain point where he, I think, maybe at a subconscious level, which slowly eventually became conscious, expected some sort of reciprocation. And the problem was that who he was expecting the reciprocation from was not necessarily qualified. They had not matured to the point where they would even realize that they were supposed to reciprocate. They might not even realize that it was appropriate to reciprocate. So it got to the point where my guy was like, I can't continue to invest in helping these people. I got other shit to do, and he wanted to sort of bring that to a head. And one of the things that we discussed collectively on the call this morning was just how we set up these alliances from the beginning. One of my vulnerabilities, it's certainly not a weakness, but a vulnerability, if I'm not paying attention, is it's very hard for me to not help people who stand in front of me and ask for help. So I have had to strategically position myself to structures that basically incentivize, if not outright require, an investment on the other side of the equation. I cannot go, like, I'll go to the gym to work out and somebody will ask me a question. Hey, you help people with businesses, right? And I'll say, yeah. I'm having a tough time. Like, there have been times where I sat down for 20, 30 minutes with somebody in the middle of my workout because I cannot bring myself to just walk away with somebody who's asking me for help. It's not something that I like doing. And so what I've learned to do is either arm myself with sort of scripts that I could share in those situations that allow it to still be beneficial. Usually it's like, hey, like I carry copies of my book sometimes in my bag. Sometimes I'll send them to a website. I'll give them my email. Hey, shoot me this email. At least have them do something before you give them more. There's been times where I've had people ask me about It's one personal trainer asking me about personal training, and I gave him one of my books, and I said, hey, I'll tell you what, why don't you read this? When you're done, get back to me, and we'll go over some of the things in that book as it applies to your business on me. Because I knew he wasn't going to read the book. And I haven't heard about the book since, and I've seen the guy plenty of times since then. So it's one of those things where at the front end, if I set up some sort of expectation of investment by the other party, we sort of start off on the right foot, right? How many people in our lives have we tried to help, and they either didn't have any gratitude, they didn't look to reciprocate, however they handled your investment in them, you got to a point where you're like, fuck, I shouldn't have wasted my time. And let me tell you, if we wanted to make a list of those people, I probably have a longer list than most. But I look back at all those people that I invested in, expecting a return that I never wound up getting. And it just educates me on how underdeveloped my alliance building formulas were back then. Right? So I've said before, and I'll share it in the context of this talk, that the only way people can let you down is if you misset your expectations of them. And a lot of times we wind up designing an alliance with somebody that we want to say they're letting us down. But if we look at this sort of blueprint of the structure that we created in this connection with them, we have almost no right to expect them to give us what we're expecting from them. And a lot of times how we wind up in that corner is because we sort of project on them our own standards, our own drives, our own inclinations. Like, it's very hard for me. Like, I even used this example this morning. I have difficulty in having somebody purchase me a meal, like paying for my dinner or, treating me to, like, it's very difficult for me to do that. And I think I'm certainly much more paranoid about it than the average person. But in my experience, those times, like, I am so conscious of somebody, even for a second, thinking that I'm using them, that I would just as soon not have them do something for me. And I'd rather be the one that gives more than I get. Well, the problem with that is we then remove their ability to participate in the relationship, and you wind up creating this sort of unequal, imbalanced connection that for whatever winds up happening, it's just unsustainable, right? So I've spoken before about parasites and how parasites are individuals that will feed off of you for as long as you'll let them feed off of you. And the problem is that it might seem like not a big deal, but ultimately the parasites need to go. And the way we get rid of them, there's varied strategies, and certainly in what context is also significant. But basically, you refuse to feed them. You set the criteria. It's like, okay, moving forward, this is what's going to happen. It's just a hard stop. It's like, nope, not going to do this anymore. And you don't have to have any ill will. You certainly shouldn't be in a bad mood about it. No anger. It's not even a commentary on the deficiencies or any sort of insult for the other individual. It's just that the relationship has either been designed to be or has devolved into a parasitic one. And in those situations, the person can't help but suck at being an ally, right? You see this in business a lot. You'll have somebody that'll hire a salesman. And they'll hire a salesman, and the salesman, this fucking guy sucks. Well, why does he suck? He's not fucking closing anybody. Okay, well, what is he doing on these conversations during these calls? I don't know, but he said he was a good salesman, and he comes with good references, and it's like, well, is he presenting it in a way that you'd want him to present? Well, I don't know. I'm not a salesman. Well, we're starting to run into a problem here now. It's like, well, you don't even have an expectation of what you want him saying. Like a salesman should be a delivery messenger, like a messenger of what you want a prospect for your business or service being offered. A salesman is not a magician. A salesman isn't sort of the mercenary you hire to sort of plug a gap in your business systems. Because as soon as they leave, there goes that gap again. Like it's a temporary fix. The way you solve it long term is you have enough of an understanding of what you would want a salesperson to do, that you provide them with the training to do so. So then when it's not working out, you don't go, this guy sucks. You go, well, is he following the system that I gave him? And if he is following the system that you gave him, then it is not the person that sucks, it's the system that sucks. Because if you got rid of that guy and put somebody else in, if it doesn't work, it's because the system still sucks. And if it does work, it's because the guy is not following your sucky system. So what's the point of all this? When we're building a relationship with an individual, if we want to have a productive, sustainable connection with them, we have to understand at the beginning what our expectations are. And does the alliance that we're constructing match those expectations? Sometimes you'll have an individual that is very comfortable taking advantage of other people. But he doesn't see it as taking advantage of them, but they do. If they don't open their mouths, there will be times where the individual who's been, accused of taking advantage has no idea that that's the way they felt, because there was no feedback necessarily that told him so. There's been plenty of times where I have had, students who wanted to complain, or wound up leaving the school. And after the fact, I hear them talking about me or talking about the school, or they're leaving some sort of, comment or review somewhere. And a lot of times it's like, how come they didn't say anything? And then it's, well, maybe I just don't have, the right expectations of these individuals. And one of the things that I had to do is I had to make it easier for them to give us feedback. Because one of my difficulties was reminding myself, not everybody is as outspoken as I am. So to expect them to do something because I would have done it in that situation is unfair. It is inaccurate. Regardless, it just doesn't work. So allowing people to be who they are, and with that understanding, designing a connection that meets it, that matches that, that is how we make sure our allies don't suck, right? So let's see what's going on here. Aaron writes, it's nice having friends you can tell things to straight up that they might not like to hear, but don't ditch you because they know you're right and just don't want to put in the effort to change their negative stuff. Seems a rare thing these days. I will say that, society at large, and this is inevitable, it's unavoidable, right? So don't take this as some sort of rant, right, or catharsis on my end. As technology improves, there is going to be more comfort and convenience given to society. Society will slowly lose, it will erode the independence that the pressure of not having those conveniences and those comforts once provided. If you didn't have a supermarket to get food and you wanted to eat, you had to find a way to go and do it. There's a pressure inherent in that produces great benefits in the form of the development of the individual. Well, in society, everything's becoming more and more convenient. Comfort is becoming more and more almost an entitlement. So there's something that's lost in that process. And it is, again, all the benefits that having pressure in your life provides. So we will see these dynamics in the connections between people, whereby what winds up happening is relationships just become more superficial. They become just more surface level and less depth invested in or seen in them, because the individuals can't really expose themselves to that level of vulnerability. So you will have individuals that it's just so easy, because of the comforts and conveniences afforded them, just bail on connections. Remember, there was a time where you had to get along with the people that you were around or you wouldn't survive. Well, those times are, in the rearview mirror of humanity at this point. And so people will no longer see the absolute utility in investing in relationships that get a little bumpy along the way. And society, just the way that it's designed. And again, this is unavoidable at this point. This is inevitable, right? It was always going to be this way, by the way. And it's my position, and I would certainly defend it if somebody had asked me to. But there is a point where we have to understand the only way we're going to stay connected to those attributes, those characteristics that come from those processes, is to ritualize pressure, ritualize it in a way that sort of accommodates or compensates for all of the removal of pressure that our comfortable, convenient lives are now giving us, right? Life today doesn't require us to be as hard as we used to be, as a society. And, we lose who we were because of that hardness in our approach to life, right? In our approach to overcoming circumstance, etc. So there's a point where it's like, if we don't ritualize it, it's just not going to happen. And the more and more people don't see a purpose in ritualizing that type of pressure, the more easily they're going to be manipulated, the more easily they're going to be controlled. They're becoming more malleable because the pressure they see is now in the form of compliance. Well, as uncomfortable as it is, as long as I do what they say, they'll still give me what I want. That's where the pressure resides. And it's a much lower barrier of entry, right? You'll have individuals now, like, what are some of the things that you'll see with this type of progression or regression, erosion in society? You'll see people who want to be victims and somehow have a victim be positioned as a hero. You cannot be a victim and a hero at the same time. It's just not the way it works. They're almost opposite sides of the same coin. They exist together, but they don't exist as the same thing. So when you look at, if there are no dragons to slay, then we have to start naming and designating things dragons. And somehow, existing, in a world that doesn't always give you what you want, somehow that is heroic in the eyes of people who have been, whose character has been eroded so much that is what they're willing to sort of put out there. Look how heroic I am. Look how brave I am for tolerating a world that doesn't bend at my every whim. That's the barrier of entry we have for heroism at this point. And it's just going to continue to get more and more, muddied. I could say worse, but I don't want to look at it as worse. It's just going to be what it's going to be, because there are always still going to be the people who represent the hard members of society. They're going to be the people who still circumstance wasn't that accommodating to them and they got those benefits, or they're people that did wind up in more convenient supportive networks, but always codified or ritualized rather the pressure that molded them and forged them into the people they are. There are always going to be crushers. Right, but the thing about being a crusher is you got to crush on the regular. It has to be ritualized because society is not asking you for that type of person anymore. We have to do it because we want the attributes, right? The consequences, the benefits of going through that process, right? It shouldn't be a mystery why, when you look at these billionaires fucking climbing mountains and training MMA and doing all these things where you're like, they have all that money. Why the fuck are they doing that? It's because they need an edge. They don't have the pressure that they needed to endure on the way up. So there they are. And they're like, I don't want to be at the top of a mountain. I want to be at the bottom of another one. And they will diversify where it is that they're investing their time just to keep that edge because they need it, because they know that's the formula that made them who they are. Right, so they sort of depend on it at a certain point, right? All right, who else? Big Frank. I've been on both ends and have learned over the time the difference between a person getting help versus being carried. Yeah, and to draw that distinction, to flesh that out a little bit, let's do that. There's a point where, as an individual, we have to have a feedback loop that saves us from ourselves. If we don't have people we trust, given the freedom, the trust to tell us when we're fucking up, to tell us when we are dragging ass, when we're being a victim, when we're acting like a little bitch. If we don't have that network, then we need to rely solely on our ability to pay attention. And there's always going to be these unknown biases, unknown to us, that we're going to continue to subject ourselves to, continue to suffer from, voluntarily almost, because we're unwilling to trust the feedback of people we've put in that role. If you are somebody who is carried, it is just as much the fault of the people carrying you as it is you that are being carried. Not to get into any controversial topics, right? Because I don't think it's even necessary. But I have very little patience for people who don't want to participate in the process of climbing life's ladder, walking life's journey, however you want to sort of say that. I have very little patience. And it's not because I want to actively condemn these people and actively somehow go after them and make their words, eradicate them. Really, it has to do with I have a limited bandwidth. I have a limited amount of energy. I'm trying to increase my bandwidth every day. I'm trying to increase my total energy every day, but they still remain finite. And I just don't see it as a good idea to invest any of it, my bandwidth or the energy that powers it, into somebody who has absolutely no belief in the paradigm that I'm following. The person who is, this sucks, that sucks, life sucks. Okay, no problem. Just fucking keep it moving. Just keep going. Because I know me at my best and I know me at my worst. I think all of us have that relationship with ourselves. And don't we know that being at our best is sort of the better way to be? Somewhat redundant, labeling it our best. But all that being said, I think you guys get what I'm saying here. It's not going to help us. It's not a good idea to have any systems that put us at our worst. Well, what does that say then for alliances that are connected to people who do nothing but erode us into that poor, negative, bad state? They got to go. Sure, they could change, but exactly how much are you willing to invest in people who have shown you time and time again they're not going to change? You see, we have to ask ourselves, then, why do we stay connected to people who have never shown themselves to be anything productive or beneficial to us? Why do we stay connected to people who have never reciprocated any of the energy that we've invested in them? When we realize all that we thought we invested, actually we wasted, because there was no return to come. Why do we continue to stay connected to them? And I would argue 2 reasons mainly, probably more than 2 reasons, but I'll lead with 2 reasons. Number one, you ain't got enough going on. Because when you're giving them that energy, because of your lack of activity and productivity, that energy isn't coming from anyplace else. When I'm spending time with people, with coaching, I charge, relatively speaking, I charge good money if you're going to be coaching with me. But first and foremost, it's you got to invest in me, because every minute I spend with you, I'm not spending with one of my kids. So first and foremost, you ain't got enough going on if you're staying connected to these people. The second reason, maybe there's more than that, but the second of the 2, right? The one being you ain't got enough going on, but the second reason we stay connected to people who are negative is the certainty that they provide us. Sometimes people who we sort of take care of to some extent in our eyes, maybe even on an unconscious level, they're sort of a security blanket. They give us validity. They give us significance. We expect them to be who they are. We know that we're helping them. They don't thank us. There's nothing necessarily we get back, but it's almost like this cathartic validation of who we are. And to that, I would just argue that if you're an individual who has anybody in their life that's relying on them, those people will always deserve your investment more than any of those other people that are validating you do. And the more you invest in yourself and the relationship with yourself, what I call the self-alliance in the book, the more you will be able to sustain that relationship and not rely on these other individuals to make you feel like you're worth anything. If you need people who refuse to reciprocate in order to feel valid as an individual, you got work to do. And the work you got to do ain't got nothing to do with them. Let's see what else we got here. My man Jamie says, strong men, good times, weak men, bad times, but only foolish men allow their offspring to be raised by circumstance. Right on, right on. And right in line with what obviously I was saying before about, as society gets weaker, so are the people who populate it. And any of the benefits we got from a harder society or a harder circumstance need to be ritualized, because society ain't going to expect it of us. Society doesn't need you to learn how to fight. Society doesn't need you to learn how to be physically strong. Society doesn't even need to learn how to be free, right? How to be articulate, how to be, independent minded. How to society doesn't benefit, from you doing those things, or at least the people who are controlling it are never going to invest in that aspect of who you are. So you got to do it yourself. How do you do it? You schedule doing it. I prefer heroes who weren't eaten by Grendel, Alfred the Great. Wink right back. Caceres, my man, says, you can always find a way to lose. That's surely a way to lose. Right on. There's always, at any point in a fight, you could always just lay down. Winning isn't a gimme, but at any point in a fight, you could lay down. You could sit down, lay down, you can get, you could just stop at any point. Once you realize that, it's like, man, what's the fucking point of that? Like, what's the point of that? I remember listening to an Alan Watts piece and some lecture he was giving. There's so many of them that you could check out on YouTube. And he was talking about if God had created everything, was omnipotent, omnipresent, was all powerful, at some point he would have to create a button, and the button would read surprise, because he would get so bored he'd have to do something that was just random in order to make it worth it. Because what's the point? And the phrase that I heard Alan Watts say is, as soon as you know the future, it's the past. Which means there's nothing to look forward to. There's no sort of binary this or that dichotomy of, what's going to happen? Which means there's no more movement. As soon as the future becomes the past, everything is dead. It's static. So there needs to be something different. So I would say to the individual who is so stressed out about their life that they start, saying, is it even worth playing it? Or why even bother trying to develop myself any more than I already am? It's like, you can lay down whenever you want. But what's the fun in that? It's like, you don't know what's going to happen as you continue to push, but you know with absolute certainty what's going to happen if you lay down. So laying down makes the future the past. And that's why it's death. That's why there's no life to be found in it. Judge Cohen says, we all need a stone pressure to grind against to stay sharp. Otherwise, the blade turns to rust. And I would argue we sharpen blades because we use them. And if you're an individual who has these tools as components of who they are, yet you don't use them, it becomes even less of a feedback loop of having to sharpen them. It's like we sharpen a blade when we go to use it, and it's not as sharp as we need it to be. But think about the state of our blades if we don't even use them. How do we use, or how do we retain the commitment to sharpening a blade that we never use? We have to ritualize it. Right? And to me, it's, every day I'm hitting the bag, I'm exercising, I'm fucking training with my kids, I'm walking on the treadmill sometimes, I'm on my hikes. I just got 100-pound dumbbells delivered yesterday. Oh man, I'm so hyped because I've been trying to get heavier dumbbells here for a while, just been dragging ass on it. So I finally, a couple weeks ago, ordered them. It just came in yesterday. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited about having these heavier dumbbells. Everything goes up to, I think, 52. I got like those Bowflex Select Tech dumbbells, adjustable ones. So having some heavy ones, it's just there is excitement and enthusiasm. My sons were even excited about it. Dad, what do you think I could use this for? Can I use this for this or this? And so it's something to be said. Like, we don't need to do any of this. I don't need to spend a few $100s to get 100-pound dumbbells in my basement. I have other weights. But it is adding and investing in the ritual that keeps us from being as malleable as the collective of society wants us to be. All right. I think I'm going to call it there. I'm pretty fired up. I'm starting to lose my voice. I am due for a meal. Chicken and rice on the menu. But I appreciate you guys hanging out. I wanted to get this stuff out today, and I did. I'm glad you guys were here hanging out with me while I did. I will be here every week. You guys know that, every Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time. Do me a favor, like, subscribe. I don't know if you're watching on Facebook. Make sure you like and follow the page. On YouTube, a lot of the people that watch it aren't following, so please do that also. Bunch of relevant links down in the description. At the very least, there's a lot of stuff I got going on, but if you're not getting my email every morning, it is completely free. And I really, really put some time and energy into it every day. All right. But I appreciate you guys. I'll see you next week. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.